Hey, how's it going? Hope all is fantastic. Today we're going to dive into some fun stuff of animal testing. Is it good? Is it bad? Who knows? Many people do, many people don't. Anyway, studies with monkeys, dogs, mice led to polio vaccines, drugs used to combat cancer such as HIV and AIDS, also Alzheimer's, hepatitis, and malaria would not have been possible without research with primates and animals. Also, descriptions of the dissection of live animals have been found in ancient Greek writings from as early as circa 500 BC. That's quite a while ago for even animal practices. Physicians, scientists such as Aristotle, performed the experiments to discover the function of living organisms. Also, dissection of living organisms with practice on human criminals in ancient Rome and Alexandria. Oh, the good old times. But prohibitions against mutilation of the human body in ancient Greece led to a resilience on animal subjects. Aristotle believed that animals lacked intelligence, and so the notions of justice and injustice did not apply to them at all. A successor of Aristotle disagreed, objecting to the dissection of animals on the grounds that, like humans, they can feel pain and emotion, which was unfortunate to the gods. From good to bad studies of animal testing, here's a list of things that help humans. Quick little list of things that were beneficial, besides eating McDonald's. Aging, Alzheimer's disease, artificial blood, cancer, cholesterol, cystic fibrosis, diabetes, Ebola, epilepsy, eyesight, flu, hepatitis, B and C, HIV, joint replacement, kidney disease, leukemia, mental health, organ transplants, paralysis, Parkinson's disease, polio, smallpox, stem cells, surgery, and even space travel. I think the last one is fantastic. It's out of this world. Anyway, animal testing in the 1800s and early 1900s was little publication objection to animal experiments until the 19th century, when the increased adaptation of domestic pets fueled interest in an anti-dissection movement, primarily in England. This trend accumulated in the founding of the Society for Protection of Animals, liable to dissection in 1875, followed by the formation of similar groups. One of the first proponents of animal testing to respond to the growing anti-testing movement was French. The psychologist Claude Bernard, in his introduction to the study of experimental medicine in 1865. Bernard argued that experimenting on animals was ethical because of the benefits to medicine and the extension of human life. Curious if you had a dog or a fish. Queen Victoria was an early opponent of animal testing in England. According to a letter written by her private secretary in 1875, the Queen had been dreadfully shocked at the details of some of these animal research practices, and is most anxious to put a stop to them. Soon, the anti-dissection campaign became strong enough to pressure lawmakers into establishing the first laws controlling the use of animal cruelty for research. Great Britain's Cruelty to Animals Act of 1876, Russian psychologist Ivan Pavlov, 1849 to 1936, demonstrated the conditional reflex by trained dogs to salivate upon hearing the sound of a bell or electrical buzzer. In order to measure the intensity of the salivary reflex, wrote Pavlov, the dogs were subject to a minor operation which consists in the transplant of the opening of the salivation duct from its natural place on the mucous membrane of the mouth to outside skin. Grotesque but lovely. A small glass funnel, they said, was then attached to the salivary duct, opening with a special cement. In 1959, the Principles of Humane Experimental Technique by zoologist William Russell and microbiologist Rex Birch was published in England. The book laid out the principle of the three Rs. The book laid out the principle of the three Rs for using animal in research humanely. First R was replacement, replacing the use of animals with alternative research methods. Reduction, minimizing the use of animals wherever possible. And refinement, reducing suffering and improving animals' living conditions. Why not have them sit in a lazy boy before surgery? The three R's were incorporated into the AWA and have formed the basis of many internal animal welfare laws. Curious how robots are going to have their own laws in the future. Animals in space and the military, since as early as 1948, Animals have been tested and used by the U.S. space program for testing such aspects of space travel as the effects of prolonged weightlessness. After several monkeys died in unmanned space flights, carried out during the 40s, the first monkey to survive a spaceflight was Urich, recovered from a Aero-B missile flight on September 20th, 1951. However, Urich died several hours after landing, possibly due to heat stress. The first living creature to orbit the Earth was Lekia, a stray dog sent into space on the Soviet spacecraft Sputnik 2 in November of 1957. Lekia unfortunately died of overheating and panic, just like a cookie in the oven. Early in the mission, according to the BBC, the record of the most animals sent into space was set April 17, 1998, when more than 2,000 animals, including rats, mice, fish, crickets, and snails, were launched into space on the shuttle Columbia, along with the 7-member human crew, for neurological testing. Since the Vietnam War, animals have been also used for the U.S. military. The U.S. Department of Defense used 488,237 animals for research combat trauma training, or live tissue training. One instance of a story that I am quite familiar with and quite fascinating was they trained dogs to go after tanks. They usually placed a bomb on them and said, go chase that tank until they blew up, unfortunately. It wasn't more so human testing, but it was more suicide mission. Anyway, live tissue training in the year of 2007, the latest year for which data was available, which included subject changing by goats and pigs to gunshot wounds, burns, and amputation for the training of military medics. In February 2013, after an escalation of opposition by animal rights groups such as People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, or PETA, as everybody loves and hears to listen about, Congress ordered the Pentagon to present a written plan to phase out live tissue training, or animals, to be exact. The U.S. Coast Guard, however, which was at the center of a 2012 scandal involving videotape footage of goats being mutilated as part of its live tissue training program, said in May 2013 that the program will continue. Who loves goats? Anyway, other responses in this era of testing animals. COVID-19, or coronavirus, global pandemic brought attention to the debate about animal testing, as researchers sought to develop a vaccine for the virus as quickly as possible. Vaccines are traditionally tested on animals to ensure their safety and effectiveness on living creatures. News broke in March 2020 that there was a shortage of the genetically modified mice that were needed to test coronavirus vaccines. Meanwhile, other companies tried new development techniques that allowed them to skip animal testing and start with human trials. Why not? People are upset about animal testing, but just do it with humans, why not? We're animals as well. Anyway, Mandra Therapeutics used a synthetic copy of the virus genetic code instead of a weakened form of the virus. The FDA approved an application for Moderna to begin clinical trials on a coronavirus vaccine on March 4th, 2020. And the first participant was dosed on March 16th, 2020. A shortage of monkeys, including pink-faced ones, threatened vaccine development at the beginning of the pandemic. As variants of COVID-19 were found, the monkeys were previously flown in from China. But a ban on wildlife imports from China forced researchers to look elsewhere. A difficult task, as China previously supplied over 60% of research monkeys in the US. Those damn dirty apes. Space travel. As more space travel stuff, Soviet Union launched dogs into flight 71 times between 1951 and 1966. So if you had a dog during that time frame, hopefully you had a cat instead. With 17 deaths of those dogs. The Russian space program continues to use animals in space tests, but in every case except Lekia's, there has been some hope that the animal would survive. On 4th of June, 1949, Albert II became the first monkey in space. Curious about Albert I. But he died on a recently re-entry when the parachute to his capsule failed. 2 other monkeys, Albert III and IV, also died when their rockets failed. Again, where's Albert I? A mouse was launched into space on 15th of August, 1950, but did not survive the return journey. In the 1950s, the US and the Soviet Union launched a total of 12 dogs on various flights into space. Lekia being the first, On the 31st of January 1961, the first humanoid was launched into space. A chimpanzee named Ham was part of the US-led Mercury space program. A main part of this mission was to test whether the task could be performed in space, the results of which were instrumental when launching the first American in space, Alan Shepard, on the 5th of May, 1961. On the 12th of April, 1961, Soviet cosmonaut Rory Gagarin, March 9th of 1934 to March 27th of 1968, became the first human to fly into space. He flew aboard the Vostok 1 and completed one orbit of the Earth, taking 108 minutes from launch to safety parachuting to Earth. The French sent their first animal, a cat, into space on 18th October of 1963. A Felix cat had electrodes implanted in her head to transmit her condition as she spent 5 minutes in weightlessness. She reached an altitude of 100 miles and landed safely, but was killed 2 months later so that scientists could examine her brain. Unfortunate of a kitty. The first dogs to return from space alive were Belka and Strelka, Squirrel and Little Arrow, also known as. Launched on 19th August of 1960 by the Soviet space program, Strelka gave birth to 6 puppies, one of which was given to U.S. President John F. Kennedy by the Soviet leader at that time frame. The first fish in space were South American guppies. They spent 48 days in orbit on the Russian Salyut spacecraft in 1976. In 1973, a common cross spider named Arabella became the first to spin a web in space, thus providing an answer to the question of whether webs can be spun in zero gravity. Now humans can spin webs in gravity as well. An American monkey named Albert II went into space on V2 in 1949 and a mouse in 1950. In the 1960s, guinea pigs, frogs, cats, wasps, beetles, and a chimpanzee followed. In 2007, Russian scientists celebrated after a cockroach named Hope became the first creature to conceive in space, giving birth to 33 cockroaches aboard a Photon M satellite. Hopefully they did not re-enter. Probably did, because roaches can go through nukes. A few examples of the research in the previous subject as well. Among many broad things in science, researchers have been studying the drug metformin, which increases the number of oxygen molecules released into a cell, to determine its effects on aging. An old diabetes drug, metformin, is cheap and been found to stall the aging process and work with mice and the roundworm C. elegans. Researchers observed a substantial increase in the lifespan and vitality of animals itself. Subjects lived to the person equivalent of 120 years. In middle-aged mice, a small dose extended their lives, while a large dose shortened them. Sort of like if you're baking, you don't want to put too much flour in it, otherwise it's stale. The proper dosage also resulted in fewer cases of cataracts and weight gain. The drug also improved the life and health span of the mice, leading researchers to further investigate the drug's potential productive effect against diseases that became more common with age, like cancer, heart disease, and Alzheimer's. You know, the lower class of things in life. The results in animals were so compelling. In 2016, the FDA greenlit human clinical trials known as Targeting Aging with Metformin. In 2016, the FDA greenlit human clinical trials known as TAME, or Targeting Aging with Metformin study. 3,000 elderly people will be tracked for 6 years to see how the drug affects their overall health. Depending on the results of the trial, the drug could become the first ever anti-aging drug, rather than going to a local pond like in the good old days. If the result transferred to humans, not only will increase lifespan, but humans will be better protected against age-related diseases. Each year in the US, roughly 150 million doses of influenza vaccines are distributed annually to prevent outbreaks and reduce the impact of the disease. Certain strains of influenza can have serious consequences, even death for high-risk persons, especially children, pregnant women, and the elderly. As many as 500,000 people die worldwide from influenza each year. That's a lot of people. Researchers are working on developing a universal flu vaccine with the help of animal models. Historically, ferrets, mice, and guinea pigs have been important animal models in influenza research. Influenza can also cause lower respiratory infection, which is the third most deadly disease in America. Ferrets have been a crucial part in influenza research and the creation of the flu vaccine. I don't mind, ferrets are stinky, but they are cute. Cons, there are none. Just kidding, here's a few. Defenseless puppies, cats, rabbits, and other animals endure excruciating pain and brutal tests, often without any painkillers, while force-fed or injected with toxic chemicals and a deadly disease in cosmetic and pharmaceutical research. When the tests are over, surviving victims are recycled to endure more crucial tests for being killed as well, often by being gassed, decapitated, shot, or electrocuted to death. Some of these horrifying tests, including for human medicine, are required by the FDA of America, or U.S. Food and Drug Administration. Despite more than 90% of drugs that pass preclinical tests on animals failing in human tests and not proceeding to the market. Animals are not reliable models of human biology, and animal experimentation is unreliable and a waste of innocent lives and taxpayer dollars, which I find quite interesting since dogs are allergic to chocolate and humans aren't. So if they did chocolate tests with animals, we wouldn't be able to eat chocolate nowadays, unfortunately. Drugs take an average of 10 to 12 years to go from concept to drugstore shelves and cost an average $2 billion to develop. It's unethical to sentence 100 million thinking, feeling animals to life in a laboratory cage and intentionally cause them pain, loneliness, and fear, as one would assume. The National Institutes of Health reports that 95 out of every 100 drugs that pass animal testing fail in humans. Animal experiments prolong the suffering of animals. Animal experiments prolong the suffering of humans, waiting for the effect cures because the results mislead experiments, and also squander precious money, time, and other resources that could be spent on other human-relevant research. Animal experimentation is quite fascinating and quite interesting that it's been around for so long. Animal experiments are so worthless that people are up to the challenge of never even publishing what they find. Forward-thinking scientists have developed humane, modern, and effective non-animal research methods, including organs on chips, organoids, human-based microdosing, in vitro technology, human patient simulations, and other sophisticated computer modeling that are cheaper, faster, and more accurate than animal testing. Forward-thinking scientists have developed humane, modern, and effective non-animal research methods, including organ-on-chips, organoids, human-based microdosing, in vitro technology, human patient simulations, and other sophisticated computer modeling that are cheaper, faster, and more accurate than animal testing, and also more humane, unless you want a goat sacrifice. The world doesn't need another ridiculous taxpayer-funded test on animals so that a university experimentation can keep riding the grant gravy train, unless you have potatoes on the side. But in all of human testing and animal testing, what do you think if animals tested on humans? Would it be concerning? Probably a little bit. If aliens came to this planet and started testing on us, I wonder how we would feel as well. Let me know in the comments below what you think of animal testing. Good or bad? What would be a different world that we would have without animal testing? Or vice versa? Anyway, thanks for watching. Bye.